Hi grade 7s, as you can see I'm here with Whitney's Kiss, chapter 3. My dearest Whitney, the letter began. He had stuffed it into her hand quickly as she walked past his school that morning. They did not stop to talk because old Goofy was around, and the high school boys were told not to bother the children from Timberletu Primary, who walked by in the mornings and afternoons. Whitney read on. I hope you didn't get into too much trouble about yesterday. Yeah, she thought. The trouble was only starting. Hopefully Mrs. Pillay will be absent today or something. English was the first period of the day, and the whole class was already there, waiting for Mrs. Pillay to arrive. She glanced at the door before reading on. I'm sorry if I pushed you too far or anything, but I just wanted to show you how much I love you. You are everything to me. You are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and I always want to be with you. I have to go to soccer practice today, so you won't see me this afternoon. Meet me after school tomorrow at the Vodacom container on the corner. If anyone sees us, we'll just say we both need to make a phone call. Forever yours, Lucky. The letter made Whitney blush. She read the letter again, word for word. She wanted to make sure she didn't miss anything. Psst. Lindiwe tried to warn Whitney that the teacher was coming. Whitney hastily put the letter in her pocket. She heard the cluck, cluck of ladies' shoes getting louder as the teacher came down the hallway. Her eyes met Mrs. Pillay's as she walked through the door. They were soft and friendly again, and Whitney relaxed a little. Good morning, everyone, she said cheerfully. Mrs. Pillay was wearing a brightly coloured dress, which always meant she was in a good mood. Morning, ma'am, a few souls answered. English, first thing in the morning, was not on anybody's Christmas wish list. Today, I want you to start thinking about a new assignment I'm going to give you. There were moans of disapproval. Not another assignment. By the end of the term, for our last week of class before the test week, I want each of you to have a speech prepared, Mrs. Pillay continued. The speech can be about anything that has changed your life in some way. Maybe a person or an event, whatever you want. The mark will count toward your year-end mark. There was a mixed reaction in the class. Lindiwe loved speeches and eagerly started writing something down right away. Rosie hated speeches and sighed audibly. Whitney's mind was not on the assignment. She wondered if Mrs. Pillay would mention the episode with Lucky again. Maybe she felt that she had let off enough steam already with everything she'd said in the storeroom and by phoning Whitney's parents. She really hoped so. How humiliating, getting caught like that. She became hot and uncomfortable all over again, just thinking about the whole fiasco. The lesson carried on, and Whitney tried to focus on English. Finally, the bell rang. Chaos ensued immediately as people scrambled to get their bags and everyone shuffled noisily out the classroom. Whitney, please will you come and see me over first break? Mrs. Pillay said as Whitney passed near her desk. I will wait for you here. Yes, ma'am, she answered, glancing at her teacher's eyes, but quickly looking away again. Here it comes, she almost said. It wasn't the first time Whitney had spent break time in Mrs. Pillay's class. She often went to Mrs. Pillay for advice, for a heart-to-heart, or just for some company. She was the only teacher who seemed to understand her, who seemed to really care about her. She had strong beliefs and strong values, but she would never force them onto anyone. Only if you really wanted her view on something and were willing to listen, would she offer advice. Whitney was always open to her advice. She respected Mrs. Pillay. She'd been to her home a few times and seen a family so different from her own. There was peace in her home. She'd met Mr. Pillay twice, and he was such a funny, friendly man. She'd never heard him say an unkind word to his wife. They seemed to be so much in love, as if they were just married. Yes, she respected Mrs. Pillay, and she wanted to be like her one day. "There you are," her teacher said with a smile. "Come on and sit down for a while." "I guess you're mad at me." Whitney was quite sure that it wasn't so, but she wanted to sound apologetic. "No, I'm not mad, but I was surprised. And now I'm concerned about you, Whitney." "Why? There's nothing to be concerned about. I'm growing up, you know." "I know that, and that's why I'm concerned. With growing up, there are some dangers and many responsibilities." "Dangers? Like what?" Whitney tried to imagine what dangers growing up might hold. The only danger she could think of was getting involved with gangs and skin problems, of course. "Well, some guys, for example. You need to be very careful with relationships." "Are you saying Lucky is dangerous?" "I cannot say that, but I don't think you know him well enough. I'm worried about his motives. It's not a good sign when he invites a young girl like you into a situation like that. How long have you known him?" "I walk past his school every day, so we see each other a lot. But we never spoke much to each other until after Valentine's Day. He sent me a card saying he really likes me." "Well, that's sweet of him, but it means you've really only known him for about a week." 9 days. Okay, 9 days if you count today and Valentine's Day," her teacher accepted smilingly. "That's still a very short time. He may seem wonderful, but you need to get to know him first. He may just want to pull you into a bad situation." "Ma'am, how can you say that?" Whitney was genuinely shocked. "It's true, Whitney. Let me tell you something about boys. Not all of them have decent values. Some boys have only one value, and that's to get a pretty girl into their bed." "What do you mean by values?" Whitney asked. "Your values are things that are really important to you. The things in life that you attach value to. For most teenagers, it is important to feel grown up, to feel big and significant. And there's nothing wrong with that, to feel big and significant. But there are boys who think sleeping with girls makes you a man. It makes them feel strong and wanted and important." "That's a bit lame." "Yes, it is. And many of them later discover that having sex does not make you a man at all. In fact, outside of a lifelong partnership like marriage, it takes more manliness and strength to say no. But often, by the time they discover this, it's too late." "Too late for what?" "Too late to save the first time for that one special person on their wedding night, and too late to be a real man who had the power to say no, and many times too late to avoid sexually transmitted diseases like HIV and AIDS." "That is scary, but I've never thought that AIDS is something that could happen to me," Whitney said. It was strange to hear Mrs. Pillay talk so openly about sex and about AIDS. In Whitney's home and community, these topics were hardly ever mentioned. Her mother had warned her about boyfriends and relationships, but sex and HIV were among the topics she avoided for some reason. Well, it could happen to anyone, and that is why you need to be very careful, even with Lucky. But remember that AIDS is not something that just happens to some people and not to others. It is entirely in your own hands. HIV infection and AIDS can easily be avoided, her teacher said. But I've heard some people say that AIDS can get to you no matter what you do. Miss Bakula said that even condoms aren't completely safe. Well, if you're going to have sex, then using a condom is very important, and it might help to prevent HIV infection. But Miss Bakula is right, actually. A condom could slip, for example. The safest way to avoid HIV is to not have sex at all until you're married. But Lucky and I weren't going to. I know, dear, but I was also a teenager once, and I know that things do not always happen the way you plan them to. In fact, the biggest danger is that you have no plan and wait until you're in an intimate situation before you decide how far you will go. Many teenagers who end up sleeping with someone did not even plan for it to happen. They just got carried away by the emotion of the moment. You mean if you didn't walk in on us, we might have gone all the way? It's not impossible. Even if you had not planned that, I think it's very important you make a firm decision now, before you see Lucky again, what you will allow and what you will not. Then tell him straight away what you have decided, before you find yourself alone with him again. The bell rang and Whitney jumped up. Well, thanks, ma'am. You're the only cool teacher in the school. I'm sorry if I disappointed you. I'd better go now. You're welcome, Whitney. You know you can always talk to me. See you tomorrow, her teacher said. With a smile, she watched Whitney scamper toward the door. Whitney's friend Lindiwe was waiting for her outside already. Then Mrs. Pillay thought about Lucky again, and her smile faded. She knew about Lucky. She had heard about him and knew that his intentions were not always as innocent as they seemed. She feared he might try to manipulate Whitney's emotions to get her to say yes to him. Hopefully, Whitney would be mature enough to see through him. Hopefully. When the bell rang to announce the end of the last period, Whitney and Lindiwe made their way over the dusty school grounds to the front gate. They usually walked together down to a T-junction where Whitney had to turn left and Lindiwe had to turn right to go home. So, tell me more about when he kissed you in the storeroom. I want to know everything that happened, Lindiwe says as they walked out the gate. I already told you everything, Whitney said. There was nothing her friend was nosier about than boyfriends and kissing. No, you didn't. You just said Mrs. Pillay walked in on you while you were kissing. Yeah, so that's what happened. Why else do you want to know? Whitney shrugged. Everything. I want to know the details. I can't tell you all the details. He was kissing me. That's all. That can't be all. What did it feel like? What did he say to you? How was he holding you? I can't tell you that. That's private. But I'm your best friend. Yes, you are. But it's still private, Whitney answered. She tried to think of a way to change the topic. Are you going to sleep with him? Lindiwe asked bluntly. Lindiwe, what type of person do you think I am? How can you even say something like that? Sooner or later, you'll have to sleep with him if you don't want to lose him. If you don't, he will think you don't love him. Lucky won't think that, Whitney said. Of course he will. Most boys just want one thing. And if you don't give it to them, they will find someone else who will, her friend said. And Whitney wondered whether she was just saying that or speaking from experience. Surely not all boys are the same, she thought. They parted ways at the T-junction and Whitney headed home past Tembeletu High. Although she knew he would be at soccer practice, she looked for Lucky anyway, but he was not there. Whitney arrived home to find that her father was in bed with a fever. Her mother had been caring for him and was scurrying back and forth between his bed and the kitchen, bringing him medicine, then fetching a wet cloth to wipe his face, then offering him water. She was visibly distressed and her eyes were red from crying. Whitney sighed deeply. She would have to help her mother care for him, and from her mother's face, she could tell that she would have to do the cooking again that evening. Whitney did not enjoy cooking, and she enjoyed it even less to have to care for her ailing father. Not because she disliked doing things for him, but because it upset her to see him sick all the time. She would much rather go for a walk with him and talk to him about her school and about his work and about whatever else there was to talk about. She wondered what exactly was wrong with her father. He had suffered from high fevers regularly over the last few months, and he seemed to be fighting a continuous battle against cold and flu. What is it with father? She asked her mother when they had a moment in the kitchen. What do you think is wrong with him? Her mother stood quietly for a few moments. I don't know, darling. It's probably just a fever. I'm sure he will be fine again soon, she said. She did not want Whitney to worry as she did. But Whitney was worried. Her father had lost a lot of weight in the last year, and he developed a perpetual cough, which sounded terrible. Even while he was still working, he had complained of fatigue and shortness of breath. Over Christmas the year before last, he already had very little energy, and he spent most of the holiday time sleeping, to Whitney's great disappointment. He'd come home on extended sick leave not long after that. He'd hoped that a few weeks of rest would help him get over this mysterious condition. But his health had shown no sign of improvement. Because of the coughing, Whitney's mother had explained to her one day that it might be tuberculosis. But when she asked her father about it, he insisted that he did not have TB. He wouldn't even go to the clinic to be tested. In the last 2 months, he had to go to the hospital twice. The first time was for a painful-looking wound on his arm, which had been there for ages and never seemed to get better. The second time was more serious. Father had developed a high fever and was very sick. He'd been in bed for several days, and Whitney's mother had given him all sorts of medicine, but nothing worked. Finally, she called an ambulance, and they took him to the hospital. After 3 days, his fever came down, and on the 4th day, he was allowed to come home. Whitney sighed again and went about cleaning the kitchen. She wished that her father would get better so he could work again. She just wanted everything to be normal again, like it used to be. She hated the tension and the quarrels at home. Her father stayed inside most of the time, and his ill-tempered mood made it hard for Mother to take care of him. He hardly ate anything, but whenever his food was late or something wasn't right, he would get mad at Mother. Then she would scold him for being ungrateful. They were at each other like cats and dogs sometimes. When she finished cleaning up the kitchen, Whitney wanted to go in and talk to her father, but her mother said he was sleeping and shouldn't be disturbed. She wanted to ask him again what he thought was wrong with him. He'd been so convinced that he did not have tuberculosis that she sensed her father knew of another explanation for his illness. She felt that he was hiding something, and she wanted to know what it was. Then again, maybe it was just better not to disturb him with all the questions. Maybe he needed to be left alone. Maybe he would feel better later, and when the day cooled down and it wasn't so hot and stuffy in the house, Whitney would be able to talk to him. She went outside for some fresh air. She found a crate and put it upside down against the house, where there was a narrow strip of shade. Then she sat down on it and took out the letter from Lucky again. "My dearest Whitney," she read over and over again. And that brings us to the end of chapter 3. Have a look out for chapter 4.